order the Woodbridge Economic Development Commission. It's Thursday, September 12th, 6 p.m. We'll go through the agenda tonight, calling the meeting to order. I first wanted to start off by introducing everyone to Sherry Fitzpatrick. I know we had some Fitzgerald, sorry. I had Fitzpatrick
If you got a
on
Michael
my brain.
Fitzpatrick, I'll take
All
him.
right, so I'm 0 for 1 tonight, and I wrote that in my notes too.
You wrote Fitzgerald. Okay, you're good.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, Sherry Fitzgerald, would you like to introduce yourself real
Sure.
quick?
So I'm excited to be here. My name is Sherry Fitzgerald. I have been a resident of Woodbridge. It'll be 11 years in November. We moved here when our twins were 1. We have twins that are in Beecher, 6th graders. Yay, almost out of Beecher, yay. And I live here with my husband Michael, my 2 kids, our dog. My husband actually was a real estate developer in Hoboken. He built the back half of Hoboken for about 20 years. Retired at 40 and became a stay-at-home dad, which allows me to do my job, which is I am a senior vice president at Paramount Global. I work in the media, which a lot of people in this town don't do. And I manage $8 billion in revenue annually. So I run the sales organization for Paramount Global. And those are channels like CBS, MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, Comedy Central. And my main job is to grow and maintain revenue and negotiate licensing agreements with major media companies. So whether it be traditional space like Charter or Comcast, or new emerging companies, which they're not emerging anymore, but to me in my industry they were, Amazon, Hulu, YouTube. Those are my main accounts, and I run a sales organization of 25 people. I've been there, it was 24 years in May.
Wow.
And I started in the department as a coordinator, so I've moved my way up and now run the organization. So I'm excited to be here, and we'll go from there.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Do we want to just go around real quick and do just a brief intro, Chatty?
Hi, I'm Chai Ujay. I think you know my wife.
I know your wife. And our sons have the same name.
And I'm Steve Francis.
Rick Bordeaux.
Welcome, Sherry. I'm Scott Hunter.
You know me?
Yep.
Cliff.
And
I know Cliff too. Tony. Hi, Tony.
And Tom. All right, great. So the next agenda item is the regular and special meetings from August 22nd, the minutes. We have a motion to...
Motion to approve the special meeting minutes from Thursday, August 22nd, and to also approve the meeting minutes from Thursday, August 22nd.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Okay, great. All right, moving into chair updates. So quite a few. We'll dive into these. First and foremost, the Woodbridge Economic Development Plan, our town planner consultant, Goldman & York. So the update there, Goldman & York, the scope of work is still outstanding. I had the opportunity to attend a meeting on Tuesday morning where they kind of went through some of the preliminaries with Goldman & York, preliminary work session, just kind of a fact-finding about Woodbridge. They covered areas like demographics, increases in school population, housing. They had some initial thoughts on our zoning as a town, some areas where they thought complexity, I will tell you, was the big highlight. I'm not going to dive into the details of all that right now. Once we get the scope finalized, we'll have them come and share out in a little more detail. I can tell you from a prioritization standpoint, the former country club of Woodbridge was the top of the list from their standpoint. So we will see a little more from Goldman & York when we get that scope of work. And ultimately, if you remember, Goldman is going to move us towards that vision and developing the economic development plan for the town, right? And they're really going to kind of lead that effort for us and work with us on that. So looking forward to sharing more. I would assume in October we'll get more detail from them. The 2030 update. So the last time we met, we talked about the LOTSIP, the DOT grant, right? $7.8 million, which is really the connectivity portion of the 2030 project. We've received approval for that. That does not include the 7.8 million does not include the design cost for the engineers, right? Which is really the next phase in that portion of the project, is to get the engineering firm procured. It will take about a year for the development of those engineering plans. So you're really looking pretty much this time next year before we start to engage construction, right? So it's going to be about a year of engineering design. Those engineering, that engineer is not included in the LOTSIP grant, so we will need to use almost $1 million, about $900,000 of our ARP funds, which remain. So that those need to be used by the end of the year based on all the updates. So there's going to be some urgency right now on, getting the engineering firm lined up. One thing I did want to bring up is the LOTSIP does not include, I don't know if you recall from the last update, does not include the light at Bradley and Amity, right? Which was the $1 million traffic light, right? So Mika had sent me a note today, and I did see this kind of come up in the Board of Selectmen meeting last night. They're still looking for a path to procure that. It's a big portion of the connectivity plan, is having that traffic light to kind of slow some of the traffic flow into the business district. So what Mika had asked was for the EDC to work with Chris Sullivan in TPZ and kind of look into, the light that's at the JCC on Amity, right? So we were able to get that approved by the state, and we're able to take some steps in order to get that accomplished. So it's really about getting the approval. Okay, we've struggled to get approval for this light at Bradley and Amity in the past, and it's getting the state approval for that. Then we would go back for another LOTSIP grant in order to do that. So what he's asking us to do is to kind of work with Chris, understand how the JCC, the light was, we were able to get that approved by the state. So what I'd like to do, I know Chatty and Steve were going to be liaisons to 2030. I'm going to actually have a chat hopefully tomorrow morning with Susan to kind of discuss EDC and next steps, but I think we should reach out to Chris. I'll get you the contact info and everything to kind of start that effort, to understand how we were able to get that light in the past, and then we'll go from there. The next piece in 2030 is obviously revisiting the placemaking recommendation. So there is, the next 2030 meeting is on Tuesday night. If either of the two of you are available to attend, or anybody that wants to attend would be great. I personally will not be able to be there.
It looks like it's WebEx, right?
I believe it's
I didn't see,
WebEx. Yes.
I saw it on the website today. It wasn't up the agenda or anything, but it seemed to indicate it might be a WebEx.
Mhm.
So even if we're traveling,
We're trying to figure that out.
I'm traveling, but
Right.
I could attend it by WebEx.
I will note by tomorrow, I think there's preference to have it in person, but I don't know if that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we should know by tomorrow whether it'll be WebEx or in person.
Right.
Is it that was Tuesday?
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Is that at 6 o'clock? meeting?
Probably 6 p.m.
Look,
It's at 6 p.m.
I'd love to watch it, but I won't be in the air, but I could watch it if you can make it on WebEx.
Yeah.
So, that is the connectivity portion, and then the other piece is the placemaking, right? Which really kind of gets into more of the design elements and sort of bringing it to life. I anticipate, I know one of the next steps for 2030 is to begin to get the zoning recommendations together for that, to kind of bring that forward. So I'm assuming we're going to hear more about that on Tuesday. So anything else on 2030, questions or?
Scott, have you heard, maybe that's what you, Steve, and Shadi will be doing, what's gonna be the interaction that we have with that and muscling the resources together that the town may need? It's gonna be a big lift, right?
Mhm.
I'm assuming, I'm thinking, major roads, arteries, shutdowns, you know, all sorts of public meetings, $900,000 of design, and there could be a lot of environmental that we're gonna open up in there too, which is gonna have a, you know, so any thought about that yet, or is it too early to see how that's going on? Because then we also have this other huge sort of development consideration is something that has zoning considerations as well, you know, is up at the country club. And so it's like you have these two major things that gotta interact nicely together. They have to play well together, and they, you know, aren't necessarily, that's something to think about as your liaison with that, because if 2030 is somewhere else and this is, country club is more here, then, you know, how do we put those together? Because they're gonna intersect very strongly together.
Yeah, the other thing that's come up, was raised to me was, you know, this whole, after the flooding that we saw in Oxford, and we know that whole area in the lower 69 there
Yeah.
is prone to flooding. But, you know, what sort of arrangements are being made within the design overall to accommodate that, you know, that sort of flooding possibility? You know, to get down the road on, you know, the development, to find out that it's gonna be, you know, that the environment's changing, that areas can be, you know, subject to flooding that we haven't seen before. Probably something that needs to be fleshed out now, as we're getting into the design process.
So to work that into the design,
I think so.
right? Yeah, I mean, I think that's something the engineering firm would wanna get into. I mean, SLR has the preliminary designs, but
Right.
I don't wanna speak too much on an area I'm not intimately involved with.
Yeah.
That's when I get myself in trouble. And, so, yeah, it's a great point. I did hear that come up last night on the Board of Selectmen
Oh, it
as
did,
well.
okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
it did. So, anything else on 2030 at all?
That would also, if I may, really loop in beyond this engineering scope, bring in the state to deal with drainage and so forth along those state routes.
Correct.
Because everything's gonna have to, be intertwined between state, local, and so forth, right?
Correct.
Okay.
My understanding is that is not in the scope of the LOTSA grant that was committed to. This would be in addition to all of that. I don't believe there's any provisions for what we're discussing right now.
Okay.
You mean drainage and things?
Yeah.
I don't know, I had a sort of a different takeaway that they sort of, as they go along, that
Right.
may be the kind of thing that gets on as an add-on, because it's a commitment to fund, but it's not cast in stone. At least I got that sort of sense, but again, I
Right.
don't want to open my mouth when I don't know what I'm
Right.
talking about either.
Right.
But at least that was my observation, that when that drainage issue came up, they said, it's the kind of thing that you can, you know, they're gonna have to make it right, and so the commitment to fund is not 100%, there may be more money in there if that comes along with that process. At least I got that sense. That was my takeaway from listening to Tony Genovese talk about it.
I think another area too is we're beginning to do some business community outreach. We realize that a lot of the business community does not have an idea of what's coming, right? And if the few, like Cliff and I were, and Mika met with Micro Creamery, like, they had no idea. And when you look at the combined placemaking, I mean, there's potential for like that esplanade that will go right through their backyard and change their business entirely. So I think that there is, from our standpoint, a need to kind of get out and make sure that there's awareness of that.
Yeah, maybe we could be sort of the troops. We could
Yeah.
be, you know,
Yeah.
give us assignments as they come up to get more bodies on it. Like, it's, I mean, the commuting population may be upset as well for a little bit of time.
Yes.
It's all, you know, but I'm just, you know, that, you know, but if you need troops, as you get involved in this, and if you need experts too, don't, you know, we can try to help you reach out to find the experts, for the town, because I think, you know, we're a small town and this is, you know, potentially a big area that we want to develop. So I'm thinking, I have this particular concern about, from a real estate development point of view and zoning changes, when we're gonna, you know, one of the selectmen made I think a very astute comment, not to slow this down, this is all, this is the good stuff, right? This is the fun stuff, we're gonna do some really positive things for our town. So don't let me be a downer on a wet blanket, but the environmental, to me, there's sort of the screen that has to be done, and there were some questions about that, and it's all good, but I think it needs, I think it needs some pretty, that would be my thought, is it needs some pretty high level. We're in the process right now of sunsetting our Transfer Act, and we're moving towards release-based regulations. And there's optionality in that, and there's different things it applies a little bit, sometimes a little bit more. I went to some classes, but my thought is that you need some really, sharp people, because you're probably going to back end quite a bit of zoning changes or something to put this together. And it's all, I think you need to know going in what, it could be good to open up Pandora's box. It could be really good, but you better be opening it up because you know why you want to open it up. I want to open up Pandora's box because I got to get someplace.
Well, you recall that Dale had talked about UConn having a group that would come down and they'd sort of flesh out some of the possible contaminated areas that are down in that 2030 district, and that they just needed to have advance notice, and we need to get on their list because they're quite busy. Do you know if anything further is developed from that?
Nothing at this point, but we can. There might be some expertise there.
Yeah, my point is it's less about the multimodal path, right?
Yeah.
But it's more about what is there.
Yeah.
And as a overall global understanding of what's going to be necessary to make it all fit. So
Absolutely.
that would be something as liaisons to seek back and either voice that or to, if you need, have, again, we can be the troops on that to find the right experts to help if we need bodies on this, because it's a town that's, it's a small town. The administration the staff is finite.
Okay. So moving on, I did have a couple of other things I wanted to bring up in terms of chair updates. First of all, on the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development, there will be a public session on October 8th. And in my last conversation with Mika, I was kind of asking, like, hey, when does the EDC get involved? That really, I think, would be the first point where we would begin to be engaged in that process.
Okay.
So more to come. I'll get that on everybody's calendar. That wants to-
October 8th.
On October 8th. The other piece, and this sort of brings together there are a lot of consultants that are involved right now, and Mika's envisioning on November 13th an all-commission meeting, kind of following the Board of Selectmen meeting, where we would bring together the POCD, the town planner, Goldman and York, the former Country Club of Woodbridge master plan, so Cooper Robertson, so all of their consultants in that project, and it would be all of the boards and commissions combined. So we're thinking, just kind of keep that date.
What day is it again, sorry?
It's November 13th.
13th. Thank you.
And I don't know if I heard it correctly, but in just sort of calling out important dates, I thought I heard the selectmen say that they're scheduling for September 23rd a special meeting to discuss country club related stuff, planning stuff. I think that was September 23rd. It's not our meeting, but it's intimate with us. So I think it's something to be aware on our calendars that there's a big meeting to discuss the country club on September 23rd.
I'm trying to think back to, because I watched the meeting last night, but it was late. So was that agreed to? I wasn't sure.
Just to stay tuned, but if it's saying, good stuff coming up, the all hands meeting, the POCD meeting.
Right.
But I think 923 is a dedicated meeting, or at least there's going to be a special meeting dedicated.
Around the master plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that segues you into your next agenda item, but.
Right. Well, I did before we get into that, business community outreach. So Cliff Meek and I had a chance to go down and interface, similar to what we did with Tide Cleaners, right, before our last meeting with Mike O'Creamery. And Cliff, I don't know if you want to speak to. I thought it was a really interesting. Every one of these,
Yeah.
I leave like pretty energized. about.
These guys started in the mall
Hmm.
with an ice cream shop, and they've expanded. They've closed, they've opened, and they basically found this location down on Litchfield Turnpike as a fluke, and they walked in, they made an appointment, they signed the lease in 2 weeks, and they were open. They're also opening up in Cheshire, out on Route 10, where Sweet Claude's was, and that's, I think, also gonna be a manufacturing point for them, so they can bring in their own. They're utilizing all local, meaning within the state, products. And the guys are super knowledgeable about
Ice cream.
development, ice cream, a lot of other things. The ice cream was great. And I think that they're really an asset. They were looking for a couple different things, and Mika was gonna circle back with them on a couple, really, really basic asks. I think that most of it was more than reasonable. But that's something to go before some other commissions. But overall, I felt that you've got people that are coming into town, they've got that small town vibe to them, and they're really trying to engage with different groups and organizations within the town to bring their business to light and kind of shine some light on themselves.
And that is one of the things, the similarities I saw with Tide, and talked with Tony about how do we create almost a central hub to direct them where, you can engage a little more in the community, sponsorship opportunities. I would say that the commonality between the two is like, how do we get more traffic down in the business district, right? Which, okay.
Kind of what we're working on.
But, that's,
Yeah.
these are two relatively new
Yeah.
businesses. I mean, Micro Creamery's been there for 2 years, right?
Right.
But they're hungry for traffic driving ideas. Signage was something I had in my notes, how do we better sign to drive more folks in?
Is anybody old enough in town to remember Eats?
No.
Do you know the pad in front of it? There was a big sign, so in terms of talking signage, there was a big DeAndrea's Plaza, that's where the Micro Creamery is.
Yeah, right.
You'll see the pad still there.
Oh.
But that pad right in front of where Grimaldi's used to be, or so you're identifying by what business
Right,
used to be.
sure.
Right.
But there was a big pad where there was a huge sign for the Merritt Parkway, and I believe it said Eats. And it was huge. I mean, big
Wow.
E's, like 10-foot E's,
Really?
Yeah.
Anyway, signage. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, and we do have another opportunity coming up. It's kind of a unique one with ServPro, which just came up next week. And Cliff, I don't know if you can
I think I can.
join Mika, or if
when is
anyone
that?
else. It's like 1:30, Tony?
30, yeah.
Yes.
Rick, I ruled you
1:30 on the
right out.
18th.
You're gonna be in the middle of class
Mm-hmm.
On September 18th. that
on
one.
the 18th.
We can field trip. No, we can't.
Right. I personally have a commitment. I said ServPro's unique because they're building a new facility in Shelton, so I think it's good learning too, right? When you
Yeah.
encounter businesses in that stage.
I had an opportunity to meet the Servpro guys out of, different franchisees out of, more sort of the North Haven area. And it'd be interesting to see what their business line is, because I think they can vary quite a bit. So I think North Haven has quite a bit of construction, quite a bit of real estate and development and that kind of thing. I don't know if it's all just remediation, so, great to have them in town.
Right.
I have a question about the hub that you had mentioned previous. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that might lead into another question I have.
When we get these types of questions about how do I get more involved, right?
That's
Like
where I
with-
was going.
I'll give you the example that I had for the Micro Creamery folks. Is like Beecher has this ice cream social, right? Which brings like 1,000.
It's tonight.
Right.
It's tonight,
Yep.
right?
Oh,
Exactly.
we gotta go.
Right.
I like this.
We have to
I
go.
like the social.
So, but any of us that have kids that have gone through Beecher, we know what the ice cream social is, right? And
Yeah.
when we first moved to town, we were like blown away. It shows you how many lives the school touches, right? So
Yes.
if you're a business down there, right? Like both of them had asked questions like, how do I get more involved in Beecher, right?
Okay. Good.
My wife's formerly on the PTO. I can kind of help them here and there with little ideas. Then there are, newsletter sponsorship. There are, Amity events. Amity speaks to 3 towns.
Yes, we do.
We go on and on about it, but how do we point them to something where they kind of had it as a calendar or just some sort of a repository
Okay.
of opportunities to get into the town a little
Okay.
bit more.
Great. And then, could I have a follow-up with that then? So, you had mentioned that the people at the ice cream place didn't know much about 2030 and stuff like. How can we fix that?
We're gonna feet on the street.
Okay.
We're gonna talk a little bit more about the business
Okay.
retention side of it.
Okay.
That's something that there was an email I received from Dale that he wants to dig into that a little bit
Okay,
more. And
good.
kind of take that off of Goldman and York's plate.
Mhm.
Kind of believes like we can DIY that, and
Okay.
he's gonna put a plan together and kind of help us move that forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
All right, the former country club master plan. So the update here, the Cooper Robertson contract is under development. That's going to lead to scope of work. I know they were still redlining, and there was a conversation on Tuesday with them. I don't have any more of an update on that contract, but we know that's sort of a gating item. The decision was made, they did not share our recommendation at the Board of Selectmen meeting last night.
Okay.
My conversations with Mika, he wants to bring that recommendation along with Cooper Robertson's recommendation. Remember, we were talking about, a small team
Mhm.
to kind of the steering within the steering, or however you want to put it, advising within the advising, right? So he really wants Cooper to bring that forward
Okay.
as our recommendation comes forward to the Board of Selectmen. So he anticipates that will be on their October 9th meeting. It's kind of interesting, they're always the night before us, right? So we don't have a lot of time to react, but that appears to be the next date on the calendar there. And yeah, we'll include input from Cooper and Dale. So Dale's gonna work with Cooper Robertson on that. I think that will.
So what might be the time frame that contract gets finalized and
I think before the next BOS meeting on the
You
9th.
think so?
Yeah, I think that they're close again. It'd be good to have Mika here, he's the one that's involved with that. But he did mention red lines, and I know that they were meeting on Tuesdays. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the,
One question, Pat. You said that the Board of Selectmen did not share our advisory committee recommendation.
correct?
Did they have an issue with the recommendation, or they just chose not to provide it yet?
You had public comment last night, they really didn't, they sort of, what I heard was, they said it hasn't, because our meeting minutes hadn't been voted on yet.
I don't know if, I didn't hear that, but.
Okay. So they said because our meeting minutes hadn't been voted on yet,
Okay,
okay, that's why it has not been brought.
okay.
So I think we had to approve first, sounds kind of technical.
Okay.
But again, there is a path to bring all of that together along with Cooper's recommendation, and hopefully we can get the steering committee question resolved.
I sort of, on the agenda tonight, I didn't see a glaring item that I would have thought might have been on the agenda, and that would have been the bar planning grant. And I'm a little bit confused, and I think the town is a bit, and I think, so I'd love to freewheel a little bit and spitball a little bit about being helpful to try to clear up my confusion, because it may be some of the confusion for the town as well, given the fact that we were pulling out technical things like a recommendation, I mean, you're getting into sort of the politics of public agency operations as opposed to, steering committees to actually do development and implementation plans for something. You're dealing with political, realities and sort of public agency laws versus business steering committees and things that get things done that have to mean confidentiality at times, because that's important in a business environment. As you mentioned early in one of our meetings, you can't just be throwing stuff out there that could be confidential and have it be a foiable thing. So I think I would love to spitball a little bit for is to say, well, what's the difference between a, town always does this, doesn't it?
6:30.
That's the 6:30 warning.
That's the 6:30.
Hey, I know.
I would like to spitball a little bit. I think it would be really helpful for me and maybe the town if they're watching, because I think we're going to get a lot of hits. What's the difference between the bar plan, and the master plan? And I'd love to spitball freewheel, not, be open about it, not trying to posture. But I didn't prepare any sort of conversation. I did it in the car coming over, and I said, okay, let's pull up my Venn diagram. And I said, okay, the master plan is this thing, and we all did the Venn diagram thing. So, and then what is the bar plan? And are they one and the same thing? Are they actually the same thing? Are they two separate things? Or is one within the other? Or what's the overlap? And so, I think we've got to sort of dig down about what the bar is all about and see how that then works with the master plan. So for instance, when I read the bar, I see a process that's not political, that is, has a steering committee that you can make a very strong case that while it's transparent, it's not a public agency. In other words, there's a big difference in the public agency and what you have to do. That doesn't mean it's bad and it's behind closed doors. And it doesn't mean it's not transparent. And that robust discussion can happen. But I think we've got this sort of parallel tracks. We've got this bar non-public agency kind of a thing working on the same site. And then we've got this political master plan by a political agency, right? And our recommendation to have that political agency appoint members to steer it. That's got to somehow now be resolved. And I don't think we have to entrench in our positions. I think we have to have a good discussion about how does that Venn diagram work and understand the bar and understand the master plan and then come together as to how we make it work. And that might happen on the 23rd, but I think it's important that we have that input at the table and think about that. So when we look at the bar narrative, and I hope we all have, because that's crucial to understanding, I think that there is a distinction between the master plan and the bar plan. There's, for instance, we're going to do, it's just an example, there's really some large infrastructure analysis that needs to be done, right? Because obviously if that is a catheter sewer, it's the size of a catheter that goes down to New Haven and it goes into a combined sewer. It's just an example. I'm spitballing here. And, that's obviously but that technical study, is less about, it's 25 feet and they're hip roofs. And, it's less of, it's really technical. We need to know that stuff. It's really sort of this dispassionate kind of technical stuff that gets done. There's other studies within this that are going to get done. And I think that process is fundamentally different than a master planning process. And so we need to come to terms with that and then figure out how we're going to try to run it to its most efficiency. And so that's the challenge for the town. I'd love to get people's thoughts on where they see and how they see, knowing what the master plan is, and we don't even put the bar plan on this. Are people saying they're one and the same, or are they different? And I'd love to get thoughts, because I think it's helpful for the town to, maybe we need somebody up on the whiteboard with two Venn diagrams saying, well, what's different between these two? Is one political, one's not? And because you mentioned confidential, so that might be really helpful to make, so we don't get into sort of clashes. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think it's valid. I honestly don't think that I can really talk much about the bar plan when two of them come together without some real preparation.
Yeah.
So how do we put that together between now and September 23rd?
Yeah, Mika, is September 23rd your special meeting?
We're still figuring that out. It's likely that it'll be 23rd, 24th. 23rd is looking like the better date right now, but we're not certain.
Has the town communicated anything about the bar grant scope and the master plan through the normal email chain that we have?
No. No, there's nothing been, like, you're talking about like the first selectman's report or the town report or anything like that? No. Not as yet.
So, Scott, you're focusing on the deliverables under the bar, right?
I'm
What we're
focusing
committed
on
to
what's
as a
the
result.
distinction.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get
Spit-
at.
I'm spitballing.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not trying to posture or anything like that, and I'm trying to be not political. I don't wanna, look for emotions. That's public agency stuff.
Right.
I want a committee that can have confidentiality where confidentiality is required. Otherwise, all their emails are gonna be FOIA. And I'm not saying that's bad. That's what public agency, that's what public government's about. But that's what's gonna be about redevelopment and development. And what comes out of that. And so you're gonna, we could get into a real, I understand you're not prepared for that. And I'm probably just a little bit more prepared for that, but not grossly prepared for it. I said 5 minutes in the car coming over. 2 Venn diagrams, you don't put bar on the thing, there's a problem in my mind. So what is it? What's the difference? Are they the exact same? If they're the exact same, then I think it derives a particular result, if they're the exact same. If they're not the same, then how do they interact with each other and put that structure together? Because I think I think they're not the same. And how we put that together, and that, the state of Connecticut tried to put a committee together to study the study, and it disbanded recently in a big furor because they couldn't even get together to study the study. So in other words, it sounds like we're having trouble getting together to study the study, and it's the same sort of, pardon my French, it's the same sort of manure that the state's going through, and I think we're better than that. And I think we're better than that. This is exciting, good stuff for Woodbridge. I'm a long-term resident, multi-generational, back to the 60s, back to the East Side. And, I think we can do it. And, but we've got to come together and not throw complete procedure at folks, and say, scratch one. Let's get on the whiteboard and do this, and have somebody say, what is the difference between these two? That doesn't happen very often in the selectmen's meeting.
Right. So do you, Scott, see the distinctions between the deliverable or the oversight?
Both.
Okay. So my understanding is the deliverable should be the same between the two. Now, there's the environmental component. I get that was not part of the original
Infrastructure.
master
Right.
plan. Right. Well, I think you're a little further down.
But I think the cost benefit analysis, that's all the stuff we talk about,
Right.
So
that would
Mika
not be part of the
mentioned,
master
Mika
plan.
mentioned to the, Vonda, I think she's the Board of Education person, mentioned, we're the planners putting together about school-age children and costs and those kinds of things, those kinds of, issues. Well, that's part of the cost-benefit analysis, right? That's really the cost-benefit analysis to what you do. And no matter what goal you have or you come up with in your steering committee and what comes out of that process, those kinds of data that goes into that process and what comes out of it is a plan. And so, where's that being done and headed up? I see this is there's no question the bar is an economic development grant. It's in cooperation, it's a brownfield grant. And it's an economic development grant. It has a deliverable to accomplish the same purpose maybe, but it's a grant, and particularly in the FAQ, I remind you, and I said it at the last meeting, and I said it at the selectmen's meeting last night, the Board of Selectmen is not allowed to be the steering committee for a bar grant. And there's probably a reason for that, right?
Right.
The reason is you may need to, if you really want to implement something, it can't be a public, we can have this robust discussion on the 23rd, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I want to step back and say, let's look at the Venn diagram and let's think about public agencies, and are they good for the development? Is that the way we're going to get it done? Because otherwise, you're not going to bring, you're not going to have any sort of confidentiality, the ability to bring up, what's the business partner doing, or what's, we've got info, well, we can't talk about, somebody tried to go into executive session last night on something. It's just like, you're gonna get bogged down in all that stuff. We can't make a recommendation because the minutes weren't approved till tonight. That's the kind
Correct.
of thing that's gonna slow down fair and open conversations in a driving implementation of something to get it done. As I say, I'm not trying to not get this done. I'm trying to get this done for the best interest of the town. I go way back, and so I'm not pursuing one particular agenda. Let the data inform it. But I think we need to get to a whiteboard and I think the selectmen need to come to that whiteboard outside of the political process.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, I'll just make a comment. I think it's important that we not disrupt any momentum that is developing around the country club master plan.
Mm-hmm.
And getting together, the selectmen getting together on the 23rd is obviously, something that's important to the development of that plan. So for us to, it's completely appropriate for us to raise this question. The validity of it and the technical part of it, I just can't comment on it now, but I don't want to disrupt the momentum that's existing around finally doing something with the country club
Mhm.
property.
I agree.
At this point in time, is it any more than just communicating to the town what the bar grant is and what the master plan is, just to let them know that we're doing that? I mean, have we ever, sounded like we haven't done that just yet. Is that just step one?
There's decisions that have to be made as relate to both that would likely be better decided on prior to putting out what's going to be there. We certainly have communicated what's going on.
Okay.
We've identified that we got the grant. We've identified that we've engaged or in the process of engaging. We selected a partner to work with us on a master plan, and that we're going through the contract process right now, which we're very, very close to completing, and we will be engaging with them. The one thing to remember from my perspective is that the bar grant is a brownfield grant. However, it was provided to us for planning purposes. When you look at a brownfield grant in and of itself, it is, in many ways, if you look at different components of it, it contains the components that indicate you're trying to develop a piece of property that otherwise would be vacant and possibly dangerous. In this particular instance, we were able to secure the grant, and we were able to secure it for planning purposes specifically. That's how we're able to use it to help us pay for the town planner, for the master planner. So I think there's some interpretations that can be had that are not necessarily the letter of what the grant says. So it is important to discuss it, understand it, and identify exactly how we would like to go forward on it. So I do understand, very much understand the two different schools of thought in terms of what we can do. And it's up to us to make that decision at this point in time. I'll be in communication with the state to make sure that there's nothing that we might want to do that conflicts with what they want to see us do in order to use the money. I'd rather not use the money than do something that we're not indicating we're going to do from that perspective. So.
Sure.
One thing I'd like to make sure, because I'm just spitballing this Venn diagram idea as I drove over in the car. I mean, I don't think there's two sides to it, though, Mika. That's my only change to it. I don't see that the bar process is something completely different than the master plan process. I think they're not two sides to that equation, and we need to get at it. So yes, the bar grant will entitle us, if we come up with a plan that's worthy of implementation. In other words, we're actually going to do something like, for instance, whatever we do is worthy of implementation. We wouldn't probably recommend doing it unless it was worthy of implementation, right? We're going to do something there to get this back online. And the capital budget, I think, is up to $2 million for remediation. At least it was $1 million in just remediation, not just knocking down buildings, but it was $1 million for just the remediation. So you've got this bar grant, planning grant, that leads us to the ability to apply for a remediation grant. And from a development point of view, if you were getting into housing, or if you were getting into commercial, industrial, even, passive recreation, right? It's a ski hill. And, that getting, and if you're gonna have kids, down there, you may wanna look at that, and if you can clean it up, and, this entitled us to get that. And they have felt that the way to do that is to make sure that we don't do it we choose qualified experts to sit on those steering committees, not political appointees, essentially, or, nominations that are, party affiliated. And I want to say that I think this whole process is evolving well.
in terms of where we started and where we're getting to is gonna be the right place. And that's just, you know, don't feel uncomfortable, we're getting to the right place. But where it started from was maybe there was 2 camps, and we're getting to the right place. But if we didn't start from that, we didn't have, you know, dissent, then we couldn't get to that right place. And so I think we're getting there, but I think we should really focus on the Venn at this point, so we don't lose that momentum, because, you know, planning delayed is progress denied. And so I think, you know, we're waiting to 23rd. This is really going, we got this grant a long time ago. We could have had the Venn diagram conversation and been moving pretty quick. And so the political process will take you longer. I think that's the derailing part of this. I think business people know how to act quick. If you're managing $8 billion, you know how to move. And I think you're in a bank, you know how to move. You know, I mean, we know how to move. But public agency work doesn't know how to move. And it's not their fault. They represent elected officials. I mean, they're elected officials. And they were elected on platforms. And they're gonna fight about how I want to get where I wanna get, rather than, is it a catheter or is it a 15-inch pipe that goes down there? Is it a combined outflow or not? What is the cost-benefit analysis? I don't really care if the guy that does the study is a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care.
Right.
So
So
that's
you're
my
claiming-
pitch. I want the Venn diagram to be out there to be discussed and say, we're getting there, but the politicians won't let you get there. And most economic theory is gonna say, this is why you gotta invent new institutions a little bit. And the bar recognizes that. It's not inventing, it's not that it's not transparent and open and participating, it's just not a public agency. It's just not, hi, I'd like to see all your emails. When they ask for your hard drive, like they're asking in the lawsuit, right? They've asked for all the hard drives because they need all their emails, right? Because it's all public records. So all your emails are public records. You don't want that in a bar steering process, to have a public agency do this. So I think what you're suggesting is you're getting to the right spot, but how we got there was this difficult and challenging discussion, because if we didn't have it, we wouldn't get there. And so you don't want emails being searched on a FOIA request trying to do a plan.
So I think there's the deliverable that's outlined in the bar, and then there's the oversight. Okay, those are the 2 pieces in that I think we're questioning, right? Like, the master plan as defined, which we really haven't seen the formal scope of work yet, okay, does that deliver what we are required to deliver in terms of the bar grant that we've accepted?
This is where I steer off course, and I'm sorry to say that, but by the way, I think the Venn diagram is a great idea. I love them. They're very productive. But there's a couple of places where I'm just not seeing it clearly. I also think that there should be consideration to how we set up the committee in terms of government or non-government. I think there's validity there, and it's worthwhile to look at that, because it's there, and for all the reasons you folks are mentioning. But the bar grant is a means to the end. The end is the consultant, the expertise the reason that we've gone with the consultant is for their expertise in terms of what we want to do and how we want to do it. The bar grant is a means by which we can pay for that expertise. So in terms of what we're trying to do from a committee standpoint, whatever you want to call it, is we want representation that will guide the consultant in terms of our specific environment, in terms of what Woodbridge wants, and in terms of these folks have done this type of thing all over the place, on very large scale and very small scale. They're pretty expert at it, and we're trusting their knowledge after vetting them for the period of time, after seeing their proposal, after talking to them a number of times. But it's not, these aren't two, like, well, what are we doing? Is it the bar grant? Do we follow the bar grant, or do we follow the master planner? Our intent is to engage a master planner, to develop a plan to provide us the information so that we can develop a plan for the country club. The bar grant is a means by which to pay it. If we want to use that money, we have to do we have to abide by what they're saying we should do. But it is a planning grant. It is specifically, and that in and of itself is a little different than the standard bar grant. Because we called them, when we first got the notification of the bar grant, we did call and say, looks like your grant is indicating we should have an end result that is development, that, structure, construction. It mentions construction, things of that nature. They were clear in indicating, no, we understand this is for planning. However, the point in terms of, I think what we're trying to do is simply say, okay, how do we put our best foot forward in terms of representing what the town's interests are with the consultant? And so what's the best process for that? Is it a process that includes the way we've done things with building committees and committees, generally speaking, which follow the government process? Or is there an opportunity for us to do something that's a little bit different than that and doesn't maintain all of the aspects of that go on? But where I'm disconnecting is that it seems like the conversation is we've got a bar grant, we've got this, and this will lead us to this, and it's like, no.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're not two separate things. They come together. But where they really, I think, diverge is the design of the master plan was a public agency. It's a committee of the town government to do this. And I think the fundamental difference is that the bar planning grant is not designed to do that. It's designed to accomplish the task and sees it a little different. It's to fund that process and to have it steered. But it's not necessarily to create a public agency. Why else would they say no existing commission can head it up? They want this broader process. It's not to say that you probably couldn't have it as a public agency and you couldn't subject it to all the mics and stuff that you're gonna wanna do. But is that gonna be your most effective way? They're both great, it's a way to pay for it, but it's how you pay for it. And so if I really worry that creating a public agency for this steering committee puts us where I've always seen as a little boy growing up here in town. It's gonna put us right where we've been forever. And I don't fault you because you are the first selectman. You are in the public, you're head of the government. You do for you. And you wouldn't listen to a recommendation unless the minutes are, I understand all that, but in confidentiality, nothing's confidential. That's not the way you're gonna build development plans because there's gonna have to be things said, and so that's where I would differ and I would ask, that we sit and say they do have some difference. And I think we're getting to a point where we're incorporating it, but we'll see on the 23rd. And I think we can weigh in here. I think it's important for us to feel like we have an opinion on how that should work. I know we've made one recommendation.
Anything else on this topic? No.
Can I just ask, what's the recommendation we made? Since I'm new to this, not to belabor it, but I
So
don't know
in
what
the,
you're
did
talking
you see
about.
you saw the minutes, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we had made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
Okay, for the composition of the steering committee, to include the boards and commissions that were outlined in the bar grant as in the application,
okay.
with the provision that the Board of Selectmen, would be able to determine the number of members, and the specific members.
Got it.
And if I could add to that, Sherry, a little bit, that it's an evolving process, and that's good. It's not meant as criticism, but there is also discussions that are leading to this that, that we're gonna have party representation, Republicans, Democrats, how many, majority, minority rules, all that kind of stuff is part of that conversation about how you select those members. And that was, that led to that. There's a backstory that leads to that recommendation about having Republicans, Democrats, so many here or there, you gotta have a minority party rule, that kind of representation, all that stuff.
Thank you.
Okay?
This may not be a popular position, but at some point, we have to put all the politics aside and say, who is going to be the best qualified from
XYZ commission to sit there and say, let's say I have familiarity with engineering. Get someone who knows about engineering. You know, don't put a funeral director in there to tell you about, you know, the size of a pipe. I mean, I can tell you about a drain pipe, but I can't tell you about, you know, the proper size that you're gonna need in order to take sewage away. At some point, I think that this is where we have to go, and, you know, we can agree or disagree, but the best thing for the town is to move forward in a transparent way, because if it isn't, when it comes to referendum, you're gonna get backlash and say, you guys are doing this behind closed doors, this isn't right, you're not taking, you know, a quote-unquote expert's opinion, we're taking partisan opinion. And at some point, we have to get beyond it.
It's not an unpopular position, Cliff.
Are we saying the same thing?
I think so.
Okay.
I have a convert.
Any other comments on that? No? Okay. So moving on to new business. So Sherry has been working behind the scenes, believe it or not, first meeting, but she already jumped the gun. If you recall, I believe in our last meeting, we might have mentioned something about the retail pop-ups, right? So I had a chance to chat with Kate Cook, Brown Fitness, and kind of share that with Sherry, and she's done a little work behind the scenes on the concept for us, you know, as a way to potentially get a little more activity, excitement in down in the business district.
So I put together one sheet. I will send all of you the full backup of what they emailed to me after the conversation I had, but I figured just to introduce it to the group, it'd be better just to kind of put it all on a one quick sheet and we could talk about it. But there is an organization called Project Pop-Up. It was started in 2021. This initiative was created to work with economic development offices and really to revitalize communities with creative concepts that are cultivated by local entrepreneurs that haven't taken a brick and mortar yet because they haven't really gotten to that place yet, but at the same time giving them a safe space to do it, and really giving them the test drive while using and utilizing vacant spaces that have been open for a while. I spoke to the COO at length a few weeks ago, and so they've had 70 emerging brands that have popped up. It's based out of Massachusetts. They do local pop-ups in other places too. We'll get it, that's like more into the nitty-gritty thing. They've partnered with 12 municipalities to date in over 20 locations. They've had 100 emerging brands that have applied to this, what they call pilot program. So you actually, if you are an entrepreneur with a small business, you actually have to apply. They vet the businesses for you. Because some people that, you know, making soap in their back closet may think, hey, I could do this. I'm on an Etsy shop, I can do this. They get to this group and they're like, you know what, I'm not ready for this, right? So it's a detailed, it's a rigorous vetting process. What they've delivered is local, diverse mix of business owners. 100% locally owned is their goal. That's what they've done in Massachusetts. 80% women-owned, 40% BIPOC owned. This is the number that I thought was awesome. Again, I'm a numbers person, so 94% of the brands continue to actively grow through their brick and mortars.
That's great.
So, which is, I mean,
great.
that number is like astonishing to me. 53 have converted from pop-ups to being permanent tenants.
On those spots or?
Mhm.
Okay.
It depends.
53%.
53%.
Okay.
So what they can do, there's different ways of doing it. You can take, like say we took the UPS store, right? And you could really set that up as the pop-up shop, and you continually just bring people in for what they call seasons, 2 to 3 month windows. And then those people can work, and we can then kind of, if something's working, we can either kick the other people out and find another place, or we move them
To
to
somewhere
another
else.
place. Again, depending upon how it works, it's been done both ways. What's interesting, I think, too, is that it really brings local artists, entrepreneurs, and all of them, and locally owned businesses to what I think where our business district is kind of dying for a bit. And what I learned too is they are funded by grants. I've been in corporate America for 25 plus years. I've never done a grant. I don't know anything about grants. I'm just gonna say that to all of you, but it's ARPA CDBG funds. And she did say too, you could get creative with tech assistant funds. Because what this group does is they actually also have a website for folks that they will promote their businesses as well. And so you could get creative in that way using tech assistance funds. So what kind of businesses, I put some pictures on here. But again, I have a list of the categories below. There's anything from food, candles, gifts, dog food places, experiences like pottery or that type of thing, makeup, apothecary, that they've done. Even I think there was like a plant design one, which has been one of their most successful ones. So again, in the very early stages of this, but we've identified what are really the next steps for us to think about. So we have to identify grant funds, right? Do we have any that are currently available? Do we have to go apply for grant funds? They also said they could help us, direct us in that space too. Now I'm gonna lose all of you here at the moment. It's about $100,000 for activation to do this on an annual basis. So if we found a place, it's about $100,000 for them to come in, flip it over 3 or 4 times for the year. And then also too, that $100,000 goes to subsidize some of the rent.
Correct.
To the landlord,
landlord.
right? So she lost me a little bit in that, and she said she was giving me the higher end of the cost because she wanted to be realistic in that space. One thing they do have, and we talked about this a little bit, Scott and I talked about it a little bit, they do have a mobile option. And mobile option is a $20,000 activation. It's low cost, low risk. And again, I think I am new to this. I've just been a resident for 11 years. I don't know any of this stuff yet, but I think there's a lot of, I think we need a lot of buy-in down there. And I don't know if landlords and even local entrepreneurs would be like, oh, this is a great idea. So I think we should think about too, do we want to take the $20,000 option from a lower cost and make it something that moves around the town and educates people and tells people before we would jump in the deep end of the $100,000, right? So just something to think about. We also have to identify open real estate. So ideally what they call a jewel box of 500 to 800 square feet, nothing more than 1,800 square feet, well-trafficked, central location, and pop-ups, they're saying, thrive in areas of other businesses. And I'm working with Rosner, I can't think of his first name. Jeremy. Jeremy and I are talking tomorrow. So we're going to start talking through that. I've already kind of thrown it on his plate. So we're going to meet tomorrow to talk it through so we can start identifying some of those areas. And then I think too, from some of the conversations Scott and I have had, one of the key things here is identifying collaborative landlords, right? So do we have someone that has a space that really wants to try something different out? And again, they need to be able to support like local entrepreneurs plus our municipality initiatives. So right now, I think we got to think about, and happy to take anyone's advice on the grant stuff. I don't even know where to start there, to be honest with you.
You've started in the right place.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome. Okay. So
I think the ARP funds was kind of interesting when you think about the deadline at the end of the year.
Yes.
Right, and the potential that would we have, at least to give this a shot for a year?
Yep.
Would that be available? The other thing is when you talk about the rent portion of this, right, that's probably $30,000 to $40,000 for an 800 to about 1,000 square foot space for a year, right? So a good portion of that is rent, and I think that's where I say the benevolent landlords.
Yep.
I haven't really found one yet, but
Right.
you may, for the opportunity to get some action, if you have a retail location that's been vacant for 4 years, and
My sense also is that I was gonna suggest you reach out to Jeremy,
Yep.
who's the former chair of this commission,
Yep.
so understands what we're trying to do. But also he invited me and the staff to a brokers meeting, breakfast. And I think along the lines of identifying those landlords, I feel like the brokers might be in the best position to do that. They know who's
They know
really
who they are.
anxious, and they know what their personalities are, whatever, in terms of what they would like. saying I think Jeremy's the right place to do, and
Okay.
I applaud you because this is, I think, a great idea, and
Sherry, I might jump in and say, you know, on the grant stuff, ARPA's kind of easy money to dispense. When you mention things like CDBG, you know, there's quite a bit of an educational, people that can write those kind of grants have to go through training and so forth, and you're in a small town. Not saying it's not great to build that out, but I think that's part of that component. It's great, it's a great idea. But this would help because there are other opportunities for grants, not just the pop-ups, that CDBG and stuff like that, that's available to this town. So, you know, if we grow the town with either grant writing staff or staff, it can pay back in big dividends that can then magnify and be things. And the other comment I have about this is a fantastic idea, and I only know how to hit things.
It was not my idea, I
But-
will just say
but-
that.
But it's a, you know, but it seems to
saying one
also
thing.
have a revitalization component to it.
Yes, yes.
And so I only know how to hit things with the hammer that I have, right? And so it's not just, but when I worked down at the university, and I knew the guy that ran New Haven Affairs pretty well, and you know, that was the big landlord, right? Yale University. But the pop-ups was also the ability to put the whole 2030 build out of the placemaking, to put that together, because it can be a real asset to the existing businesses down there, because nothing looks better than the restaurant's opening soon. Meanwhile, they didn't have a lease yet for it, you know what I mean? But the whole thing was sort of built out with pop-ups or whatever, it was a revitalization. And then before you know it, they converted, or that restaurant did open soon. There was 5 open, but then there were 7 open because the chairs were there, the decor was already in there. People put the money in the decor, they didn't even have a restaurant. In other words, but the restaurant was there, and then the operator came. So it's a fantastic idea for 2030. I just applaud you, but we got to build out some grant writing for it too.
Yeah, and I think too, the Project Pop-Up folks, very well educated on what they do and what works and what doesn't work, and I would look to them to guide us, and that's part of obviously the cost too, because they want it to be as successful as it can be as well.
timing is pretty good as well.
Yeah.
As of Monday, we've got resources coming from SCROG, and we've got SCROG itself, which could also help us, particularly with the grant writing portion of it. Because as Scott said, for example, CBDG is a good example because there's a priority level with that. I mean, if you can use a grant for this, or you can use a grant to help some seniors in our community put a new roof on that they otherwise couldn't afford.
Got
You know,
it.
so when it gets to that, it becomes, you know, well, this is a bigger priority.
But, yeah,
So,
but-
but this Yukon Fellow is the resources that's coming in is a Yukon Fellow, and we're bringing him specifically to look into, organize, identify, and put on a timeline grant opportunities. What they are, how they're available, what's required in them, and when they're available.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective, I think the timing is also really well, you know, just lucked out in that, along those lines. And we have them for, I think,
CDBG training starts soon. So
Yes,
like
very
my
much.
wife was
Well,
always trying to
yeah.
get me to do it. I said, I'm retired. I retired 5 years ago. But
I will say
CDBG
too,
starting.
I will say too, they did recommend that spring and then the holidays were the 2 best times to do this. And I don't think I said this before, but what they would do is they would basically get a year lease from a landlord, and they would bring in 2 to 3, potentially 4 in what they call seasons and flip them out. So each few months, there would be something new in there, and the idea, hopefully, right, is that one comes in and one goes somewhere else, one comes in and one goes somewhere else. That's the idea of it. And look, we don't have a traditional downtown, we don't have a traditional street area, so we have to think about, and that's where I think Jeremy's gonna help me the most too, is really think about what we have available, where people are actually looking to do, and who are the people that are, like, wanna be collaborative, because this is a traditional, you know, commercial landlord is gonna be like, you're crazy, like, this is stupid.
Well,
well, I'd rather have somebody on a 5-year lease than on
Right,
a 1-year.
right,
yes, but if you've
But-
been vacant for 4
Right.
years,
Then they might change my.
And it looks bad.
right. One thing I do really like about this idea is first of all, it's local,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which I think resonates with a lot of folks in this town. And secondly is it's unique, right? So you're not competing with what's in Orange, what's in Hamden, right? It is a potential, with the right promotion, a traffic driver, right? To bring not just something Woodbridge would get excited about, but
Yeah.
other people.
the surrounding towns. you know.
Sherry, do you have a sense for what the risk exposure to the town is for this sort of
Meaning what? What do you mean risk exposure? What do you mean by
I'm
that?
trying to understand, aside from grant writing, what other things are we gonna be involved with, and what might be, risks to the town associated with our involvement? Financial risks, reputation risks, or those types of,
I mean, look, I think if we're gonna put a $100,000 grant towards something like this, that's a risk, because we've never done it before. So that's just, you're gonna jump in and you're either gonna do it or we're not gonna do it. And if you are deciding to do it, you're taking that risk financially. That's number one. Two, I don't see how there could be a risk from supporting local entrepreneurs, mostly women, mostly probably diverse. If anything, I think that would probably be a great PR spin for us in this town, to be perfectly honest. So I haven't seen any risks yet, but as I get deeper in with them on all of this, that's obviously a question we would talk through. Everything was a lot of sunshine and roses when I spoke to them, to be fair, because they were pitching me, right? As you get into things, and as, again, we would have to sign an agreement with these folks, we'd have to go through the details with all of them, that's when all the stuff comes out, right? When you're actually getting into the details of everything. But right now, the only thing I see would be a financial risk from what I've researched so far.
And there are multiple companies out there that do this, right? This
Yeah.
is not the only game in town.
So
They just happen to be one state away.
Yeah.
so the 100,000 is grant money?
Yes. This is funded fully by grants.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And give them $100,000, they come in and manage it
They come in and manage it
for
for
a
us.
year.
Yep.
Sherry, does that include the build-out cost in
So,
that,
a
or
lot-
just?
That's
So-
on the land,
yes,
right?
so that you cannot, the only thing we talked about was they can't come in and do like major construction.
Right.
They can come in and paint, do some, things here and there, but they're not gonna like build walls and do that kind of stuff.
But that's in the 100,000.
That's what they've
Their
said,
assumption.
yes.
Okay.
And,
Yeah,
and
because the landlords will prep the space, but they sort of,
Yeah.
they end at some point, right? Like,
Right.
So that would be
It seems as
interesting,
if
because
they
that's
would-
another
It
huge,
seems they would come in with fixtures, but again, they're doing this, right, over and over and over again. And so I'm assuming that they would have that space for that, and they're just moving people around. But again,
Right.
first blush, little sunshine and roses, but
Mhm.
I think if it's something that people wanna continue exploring, I think we should just
Yeah.
keep seeing what we could do.
I agree.
is there a tax opportunity for the town with something like this, or is it?
No, the property owner is paying taxes on that property at any rate. It depends if somebody, and because it's small business and because it's a type of business, I doubt that there would be very much. If somebody was coming in with a lot of machinery and or
Right.
appliances and things of that nature, property that's valued higher. But this sounds like it's kind of small and so I don't think there would be, maybe some, certainly not anything on the downside, but I think, there could be maybe some.
but the real estate valuation is higher occupied
Yes,
versus vacant,
it is true.
right? So,
So that, yes, that in and of itself for at least a year,
right,
So
Yes.
the landlord would pay more taxes.
the real
Yes.
estate taxes would be higher with an occupied. And
I
again,
have to verify that in our town.
this is where I want to talk to Marcia, right? But,
Yeah.
Got to verify that. I know it's generally, I know from my experience, but
Who knows?
I have to be, I'm not certain on that. I don't want to say definitively because I don't know for certain.
right,
That's all I got.
Okay.
Some more to come.
great,
I think it's great.
Thank
Thank you.
awesome.
Obviously, whatever our office can do, let us know.
I will, thank you.
Okay, I did have a piece in here on business retention, and I kind of got to this a little bit earlier. One of the things that when we met with Goma New York on Monday that came out of it is they started to talk about a business retention strategy, and Dale is going to take that piece, right, and we're gonna build a formal business retention plan. I know I talked at the last meeting, like Cliff and Rick, Steve, depending on availability or whoever would want to be part of. I really think we should have, similar to the 2030 liaisons, right? You should have a group that sort of head up this piece of what we do, right? There's the attraction piece and there's the retention side. So I would, kind of open that up to anyone that would like to be a part of it,
I would like to be a part of it.
right? Right.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm chatting with Dale on Monday, to
Okay.
kind of get his thoughts on how we
Okay.
move that forward. So I would say 10/10, October 10th meeting, we'll have.
Not my strength.
Well, and, you know, we do have numbers, right? Like the old EDC, there would be half of us here sometimes. So we have a much stronger group. So the last piece, and Mika, it's good you're here, I wanted to talk about, we did send out the strategic plan from the Board of Selectmen. We're not gonna discuss it tonight, because everybody just got it, and
Understand?
there's a lot there.
Yes.
If you could just clarify for us what action you would like us to take. Is it recommendations, input, or?
Both, yes. Recommendation is actually, as far as the deliverable is concerned, along the lines of what you're doing, for example, you've just identified an opportunity for the pop-ups. You've talked about the retention plan. It's really to outline a plan in terms of what the EDC is doing to develop economic benefits for the town. So one of the first things is for us to actually develop something that the EDC feels is a roadmap in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and some degree of timelines associated with it. So that you feel as if you have a very specific direction, strategy, and in objective in terms of growing our town, or growing our business district in particular. So that's basically the most tangible deliverable as far as that's concerned. Aside from that, it's doing what you're doing, but understanding it in the context of what we have outlined on our strategic plan.
Okay.
So,
So it's working within that frame. You're not looking for input to the specific tactics that are outlined, like,
Oh, no,
we may have, I know we'll have clarification questions.
no, we absolutely are. It's a dynamic document. It's not meant to be, this is what we're gonna do, guys, and,
Okay.
Step 2. This is more, it's very much that. So it's, we're bringing it up in most of our meetings. We just do it as an update specifically to identify, is there something we should be modifying? And we wanna make sure that we're taking a priority. If the country club is a priority, that's what we're doing. We wanna make sure we don't forget some of the other important items that might be there. So we want to make sure, it's something that keeps going. What we've done on our agenda is, if you look at our agenda, you'll notice letters and numbers, and it's specific to the strategic plan saying, okay, this is a discussion we're having, and this is where it pertains to from the strategic plan standpoint. What we wanted, what I didn't want to have happen is we develop a strategic plan, and it's not something we're actively working with and on. So I'd like, we've taken the time to identify some of the things that we want to do, like to actively use it as a means by which we make progress. And the whole intent, make progress. Let's, if we're going to build something, let's make sure we're doing it on a regular basis. So yes, in the answer to your question, we very much like your input. If you see things that are missing, if you feel like something should be added, wonderful. If you feel like, this is, we're not going to get to this no matter. This year, we're not gonna do it because we've got this, and this going.
Right.
Let's move it out of there. We wanna make sure it's something that we're using, that's productive.
from a newcomer to the EDC, and it's got history with 2030, is 2030 mentioned? I haven't, taken a look at the strategic plan yet. Is 2030 mentioned in there as well, or is that separate from us? Or is this sort of a work in process to say EDC is sort of the bigger, or the umbrella that all needs to, we play in the same sandbox? Because, and I'm not trying to create any organizational challenges, but I think it's helpful to understand where we've been, so where we're going. Like I know the charge for 2030 is to come up with the plan, and so, and maybe that's morphed and it's changed and we haven't just updated it. So I'd love to get your sense in writing the strategic plan, what was the thinking of the drafter when they wrote in the EDC? Were they writing in 2030 and EDC? Were they writing in Coupa? You know what I'm saying? What did they think, that drafter of that plan, what was that drafter thinking about when they used the word EDC? Because I don't want to be making a comment if that's not an EDC comment, and I don't know the history of how this all came together.
There's an administrator to the plan, but there's not a specific drafter. There's a committee, we formed the committee, David Vogel, Sheila McCrevin, myself, and Tony. meet to discuss the strategic plan, and that's what we put together. What we did is we took what was already in place from the last administration, and we adjusted that. So in terms of your question, as far as what they're thinking specific to 2030, interesting question, Scott, because
Like,
from my
what is
perspective.
EDC? Like, what
what-
is it? What does it mean?
But it does reference 2030.
Yeah,
It-
And
in the first
EDC
item,
is
actually.
the first one, it breaks it down.
So recognizes that there's work being done there.
Right.
Now, your question, I think, is a little bit deeper than just the strategic plan, and it is a very good and valid discussion point from my perspective is, so how do we proceed with EDC and with 2030? You know, at the risk of, I don't wanna, one of the LOTSIP grant that we're looking at, that we've got commitment to fund, is a direct result of the work that 2030 did. Okay, that was very directly tied to them. EDC had always intent, at least what I've been told, I wasn't part of it at that time, but I had been told that EDC was always supposed to be a part of that. And there were people who were attending and part of it. Jeremy is part of that. Jeremy is still part of that
He was
commission.
part of it from the
And
beginning.
he was part of it from the
And then
beginning.
when Jeremy, then the chair of the EDC moved on to that, onto 2030 as well,
Right.
Robert,
Right.
for the time being. And then when Robert left, then EDC never had outside of Jeremy, who would, obviously.
So when the committee was formed and the work that they were doing, there was progress made, so it was wonderful. Keep them doing what they're doing. And that still more or less holds true from my perspective. But my sense is EDC now is different than EDC then. And I believe my intent and what I've communicated to both groups, at least to the leadership in both groups, is that I'd like to see EDC take over what 2030 has been doing. 2030 is a committee. It was formed specifically with a very specific intent in mind, a future-looking plan. So once EDC is in a position and feels like you're in a position to take that role over, we should be discussing that. That should be something we.
Before you had a chance to join us, we had Steve and Shadi, as the liaisons. We were talking about that and how we sort of move forward with that, getting that Venn diagram worked out for the Woodbridge Country Club. You can't sort of divorce that process from an economic development point of view from the LOTSIP thing that are going on. Two huge, pretty huge projects going on at the same time. So I think that makes total sense, and we were discussing that before you mentioned it, that liaison thing, liaison relationship, and bringing that Venn diagram together, that one together, is going to be important too for the whole town's economic development plan.
From
Not
my
two separate ones.
And from my perspective, this was a view of the Board of Selectmen. Keep that in mind. This is what the Board of Selectmen are saying, okay, here's what we'd like to focus on. And we recognize, obviously, there are numerous boards and commissions that we work with. Well, what can we get out of the boards and commissions to take us toward a goal of what we want to do? And so we put something together so we had structure and we had something that we could start working with. And the next step to that is to communicate it out to all the boards and commissions so they understand you're part of this. You're part of this, and we want to understand what your role. We want you to understand what your role is going to be. And if you have questions on it, you ask us. If you've got recommendations, you come to the Board of Selectmen and you present those recommendations. That's how my sense is. That's how this is supposed to work. Your expertise is in a particular area, and you're working in a particular area. My expectation is that you're going to come up with ideas like this. You're going to come up with different things, discussion points, like you've been having all night here, and you're going to present them to the Board of Selectmen for consideration. So, as far as the strategic plan, that's what it's all about. So I wanted to make sure I got it to you folks, only because you had the meeting for one, but also, and I didn't expect you to really put it in the agenda this time, but I did want, it occurred to me, and frankly, I'm going to be very honest with you. It was like, we're working along, we're running along with this thing, and it's like, I don't think I ever sent it to EDC. And they're on the first page quite a bit. So let's get it over to them and let's start doing this. November 13th, where I'm hoping to have a meeting with all of the commissions at the same time, with the intent of reviewing this, communicating this, to make sure everybody understands, listening, hearing the same things, understands the same things, can input, we'll have the different consultants, we have a number of, like Scott said, we have some big projects going on. And we're bringing some people, some,
Exciting big
it is, it really is. And, so let's try to leverage that and make sure the resources that we're bringing in, the town planner, the master planner, the SLR who's doing our POCD, whoever we're gonna work with, the engineering firm that we're gonna work with for a lot zip. You know, these resources are there for us. Let's identify, make sure they understand what we're all about, and let's identify what they're gonna be, make sure people understand who they are and what they're bringing to the town. So the town understands there's value here.
Scott, I want to be cognizant of your meeting. Would you mind if I just made one more comment on new business? Or would
You may.
I don't want to.
Is it new business?
Huh?
Is it new business?
We're in new business, aren't we?
I just have one
Yeah, of
question,
course,
if I can
of course.
interrupt you. I may have missed it. So are we, as the EDC, going to build out a complementary strategic plan as well?
I think what we want to have for the next meeting is for each of us to go through this, review it, right, and see where we may have some input, some things for, I mean, I can tell you things that I need clarified just right off the top of my head looking at it, right? But let's just take time to look at it, review it first, and then come up with our questions for clarification, areas where we may want to make a modification.
All toward a plan of our own in timeframes to accomplish certain things?
Well, right, to accomplish what's outlined by the Board of Select.
I see. Okay.
Steve, for example, may I?
Absolutely.
You know, for example, on goal 1, strategy 1, tactic C. Discuss target business sectors and growth goals with EDC. Receive business development plan from EDC, including future needs for workforce housing, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
Okay?
got it.
You're in a better position to determine how that can be done and when that can be done than we are. So what we'd like to do in the green columns is start outlining some timeframes and setting priorities for priorities and timeframes. So that's what so what does that mean? It may mean something to us. We want EDC to develop, to provide us a development plan.
Got it.
But you can come back and say, I don't know what that means. You know, here's what we can do. Or here's what we are doing more so, because it's not like you guys are just starting fresh right now. You've been working on some things, and that's all part of this.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
I say it not, for down the road as a new business agenda item, as this is the selectmen's plan and then it says 2025, it would be great if it was the plan forever, right? I think we gotta think about as we build out our capacity on EDC and think of these issues as a work in process. I think we need to have a boot camp onboarding, you know, as we become onboarded to this EDC, as we become better at what we do with Dale Croup and the consultants that we learn from, that we start at this time developing the materials so when we put that next commissioner on, these selectmen are gone, they're not elected and they got new ones, you know. But the EDC has an onboarding process where we have common knowledge, common understandings, because if we start scratch on all this stuff, we're gonna be, we're gonna hiccup all, and then we're gonna have to get to the thing, and then all before you know it, we got a new selectman crew, and so I just think that that's an important new business. I will let it go at your meeting, but I think that's an important thing that we develop crucially, because my goal would be to, retire fully from everything, and then have a whole boot camp though that we've developed that is right for our town, that any new member comes through, Sherry, you're learning with us. But it would be nice that we learn from you. We just learned a lot from you today. We're excited for you here. But, to have that boot camp to transcend the selectmen that are coming in.
It is kind of interesting that the terms on the committees and commissions, it's not really interesting. You want some consistency, far longer than the terms of.
And I'm saying,
selectmen.
make it a 100-year term by having a onboarding process.
Right.
In other words, anybody that comes on is
This is what we're
interchangeable.
doing.
They're all on,
Great
and
thought.
as the curriculum develops, right? As the society and curriculum develops, I think then you have an EDC that's like humming, and we have a small town. We can do it. I know we can do it.
So Scott, I know you have an example in Fairfield.
Supreme Court
Right.
meeting.
Yes,
That
Mark
sort of-
Barnhart is the town planner. Mark Barnhart, I don't know if you guys have attended any of the Scrog stuff, but Mark Barnhart is the town planner down in Fairfield. And, he's like the town manager. When he got there like 15, 20, whatever it was years ago, he went through the exact same things like
when we were starting, and he finally got it to an onboarding process, and then they make some really, they have different economics and they have different issues, but they made some really great strides by having that. So he now, runs it through everybody, you're going through boot camp, and then you're pretty much ready to contribute, and then they can get things done
So
in the right way.
I don't know if there's any way we could get examples or, to benchmark off of that, because
We
you
could get
brought
Mark
this
to
up a couple of times.
Yeah.
You can speak to us, like.
Mika was at the meeting, we were all out at Scrog, and Mark was speaking, and a guy up from, I forget who it was, up north. But they were,
Windsor or something.
yeah, but they were talking about their, and so that was the,
Right.
and they're making, they got some pretty interesting stuff going on, and so we could get Mark to come in. That's,
Yeah.
we,
Just like
we know,
tangible, like here's what we do, this is an example of how we roll it out. I mean, you're saying it's a whole onboarding
that he put
program,
together,
right?
right?
So
and he-
there's content, there's,
But,
right.
but you could be cool if one of, I don't want to talk to me, but it'd be cool if one of us was the onboarding guru.
Right.
That,
Right.
welcome Sherry, here's the school for Woodbridge that you sort of got to go to, because then we're all talking in the same economic development, not,
Okay.
I wanted to bring up one piece of new business with regard to the traffic light, and this is just, again,
Mika, we did touch on it earlier.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank
we're
you.
gonna, Chatty and Steve are gonna kind of take that up with Chris.
perfect.
Right, to
Thank you very much.
Kind of get a look at what did they do at the JCC and how do we progress that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Public, did you do public
Oh, I'm
comment?
sorry. Any public comment? No. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Okay. With seconds? All in favor?
hi.
All right. Very good.